Over to Pranali.
Yeah.
So you are unmuted. You can share your screen now, Pranali. Is Pranali?
Yes.
Yeah, you can share your screen now.
It shows host is disabled to participate the screen.
Okay. Now you can try it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Welcome. A very warm welcome to all of you. I, Pranali Dahiwal, along with Anagha Kulkarni, take this privilege to present an analytical survey on image compression. The flow of presentation is introduction, overview, literature survey, limitations, conclusion, and references. Firstly, introduction. Image compression is minimizing the size of a graphics file without degrading the quality of the image. It is a type of data compression applied to digital images to reduce their cost for storage or transmission. It plays an important role due to bandwidth and storage limitations. The goal of image compression is to obtain a representation that minimizes bitrate with respect to some distortion constraint. We all are aware that smartphones are highly useful for communication and entertainment. They store personal data and sensitive images. Therefore, there is a need to secure such devices with inbuilt biometric authentication because biometric authentication cannot be faked or duplicated to fool the system by unauthorized users. This diagram shows applications of biometric authentication at e-commerce website to store sensitive information and payment details. Human biometrics is regarded as a groundbreaking tool for preserving privacy and security in many computer vision applications, such as biometric authentication, secure access control, visa processing, and border checking. Biometric features such as fingerprint, face, retina, iris pattern, voice pairs, palm print, and signatures are commonly used in biometric authentication. However, in recent years, face and facial features have become the key attributes in biometric authentication due to their uniqueness and robustness. Through this article, we have done in-depth analysis of facial image as a tool for biometric authentication. Fingerprint and retina are unique to every human being on Earth, whereas facial features are very diverse and have some kind of similarity with features of siblings and relatives. Hence, deep learning methodologies for facial authentication are needed. Due to computationally complex nature, facial data cannot be processed on the device. Hence, there is a need to offload the facial authentication system and recognition of image in the cloud platform for computation. Recognition system on the cloud is highly responsive, and a large number of facial images need to be compressed to minimize the transfer rate and improve the performance. This diagram shows how captured image is compared with the database stored image in the cloud for authentication for granting authorization privileges. Hence, image compression plays a vital role for transmitting the image to cloud in least amount of time. The next is about overview. In this article, we have done literature survey of some 40 papers and depicting various methodologies used for image compression in general and facial image in particular. An in-depth analysis of methodologies used, their advantages and limitations is done. This chart shows the various methodologies used for facial image compression. They are based on fuzzy root principal component analysis, quantization, wavelet transform, JPEG lossless compression, high dynamic range texture compression, maximum likelihood differing scaling, crackage region value, low and column action method, file processing gateway array, medical image compression algorithm, inversion coder, convolution neural network, and discrete cosine transform. Due to time constraint, we have classified the widely used image compression methodologies in 3 subsets, namely quantization, transform, and principal component analysis. And I have chosen one paper from each subset for detailed methodological analysis. The first paper is 2018 paper, End-to-End Facial Image Compression with Integrated Semantic Distortion Matrix. This paper is based on quantization method, where an end-to-end facial image compression framework with a variable block size regionally adaptive pooling module is designed. This framework is efficient over JPEG 2000 WebP and neural network based codecs. They have used Celeb A dataset, which is collection of celebrities dataset. This diagram shows step-by-step analysis of this method. Step A is non-overlapping pooling operation. Here the complete image is divided into numerous blocks and all blocks are concatenated into a matrix. Here the image is converted into non-overlapping blocks of fixed block size n with overlapping edges. Step B is training stage where mask M is created by identifying the most disturbed area by applying neural network to get more facial features. Step C is quantization. In this step, pixel rate is decreased, as a result of which the grayscale image becomes more unclear. Step B is mask detected in step B is applied to grayscale image, whereas in step E, the pixel values of least disturbed portion of face are reduced, which thereby reduces the size of the pixel and in turn compress the image. The advantages of this method are it concentrates on facial features, whereas in generic compression technique are not concentrating on facial features, and they have even good compression ratio up to 90%. Disadvantages are they are using only RGB channel, and another one is it is applied on less contour facial images, and simultaneously, as I have told earlier, they are using Celeb A datasets where well makeup clear tone images of celebrities are used. It means less disturbance in the face gives good compression ratio. This is all about first paper. The second paper is a 2014 paper, medical image compression using block-based principal component analysis algorithm. Principal component analysis is a dimensionality reduction method in which large data set of variables is transformed into a smaller one. This is a block by block principal component analysis in which a Messidor medical image database of average image size 2240 by 1488 is divided into blocks. Then mean value along each row of the image subblock is calculated. Then it is subtracted from each pixel value to get the principal component. Then covariance is applied on the mean adjusted matrix to measure the linear relationship across the block. The eigenvector and eigenvalue of the matrix are calculated. The eigenvector with highest eigenvalue is principal component of the image. Feature matrix V is containing all the corresponding eigenvectors is formed. The transpose of the feature matrix is multiplied with the transpose of the mean adjusted matrix to obtain the compressed data with reduced dimensionality. Here, the degree of image degradation and compression rate depends on the number of principal components selected. Lesser the principal components selected, higher the data will be compressed. The advantages are they are using Messidor, they give good compression ratio up to 90%, and disadvantages they are using Messidor grayscale images only, and medical experts are not consulted for evaluation of these results. The third paper is 2002 paper, Cascaded Differential Wavelet Compression of Chromosome Images. This paper gives a method of chromosome image compression where the region of interest is determined and segmented. It gives lossless compression of chromosome region of interest and lossy to lossless compression of remaining image parts. Chromosome karyotyping analysis is routinely performed in clinical and cancer cytogenetic labs. The result of this procedure is called karyotype image. Chromosome images have an important characteristic called karyotype analysis. This is called for lossy and lossless coding because lossless compression of region of interest is required and lossy compression of rest of the image is acceptable. Such transform and coding of region of interest and the background image separately is not done in JPEG 2000, and this limitation of JPEG 2000 is successfully addressed in this paper. This diagram shows the flow of detailed procedure. The SPIT, set partitioning hierarchical tree algorithm, is used for image compression, based on which a symmetric binary tree is formed and only left or right half part of the tree is used for image compression and decompression. The advantages of this method all are the overall design of coding scheme is based on a combination of differential and wavelet coding operation. The coder generates embedded bit streams that allow progressive image coding. This is very attractive for progressive image transmission in telemedicine for fast searching and browsing of chromosome images. And disadvantages are it considers only 2D chromosome images. This is all about third paper. Now the last paper for discussion is a 2018 paper titled An Adaptive Image Compression Method and its Application to Medical Image. This is the diagrammatic flow of this method. In this The image block is divided into 4 by 4 blocks. These blocks are classified as shade block and edge block. Further, the edge blocks are classified into 4 sets: vertical edge, horizontal edge, lower diagonal edge, and upper diagonal edge, depending upon the defined code books or the rules defined in the code book. These images are compressed and decompressed. Due to time constraint, I am not going to explain the detailed methodological analysis. The advantages of this method are: it reconstructs high visual quality image with higher peak signal to noise ratio. It reduces the computationality complexity, and higher quality edge detection is done. The disadvantages are: it considers only medical magnetic resonance brain
Dear
images.
presenter, you just have 2 minutes left.
Yes, ma'am. After the next slide is about limitation. After analyzing 40 papers on facial image compression method with utmost scrutiny in our article, we have put forth limitation of each method meticulously. Due to time constraint, a few major limitations of 3 earlier discussed methods are highlighted here. In many articles, the process of quantization is based on only one parameter like pixel value, distance, kernel value, weight, grayscale factor, or saturation factor, as a result of which decompression, we get only one parameter value and we may lose other parameter value. Another limitation is it works on higher entropy images only. And lastly, it requires high computational cost because of linear approach to the compression process. The principal component analysis method faces quality issues of decompressed image because of not sufficiently handling the component attribute of the image in the reverse engineering process. And finally, the wavelet transform is yielding better results only if the image is having higher entropy. Lastly, at the end, after discussing some significant image compression methods with their technical details and reviewing their major limitations, I conclude that many researchers have been highly focused on only one aspect of the facial image authentication, such as compression performance, security, speed of the authentication process, application of the scheme in a variety of approach, which is a very conservative approach and that doesn't solve the problem of facial image compression paradigm effectively, and hence there is a need of an effective and efficient facial image compression technique. These are the references I have used for this presentation, and I'm thankful to all the organizers for giving me an opportunity to present my paper over here. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, Pranali, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why you have selected only these 4 in presentation? Any particular reason?
Sir, these basically I have shown earlier. I have done an in-depth analysis of total 40 papers.
No, that I have seen, but for a detailed presentation, why you have selected these 4?
Yeah, I'm doing research in this image compression, and my particular method is based on this quantization method only, and it will be overcoming the limitations of this wavelet transfer and principal component analysis. That's why I have chosen these 3 particular methods, and these are widely used as well. And
one important point you have missed: whenever you are doing some comparison, then you should also tell in detail the data set used, because that is very important.
Yes,
in paper 1 you have used some data set, and you should tell the number of images and all those things. So that is very important when you are comparing any technique.
Yes, sir.
And one other important point here is because you plan to use cloud also in your work.
Yes, sir.
So security issue is also very important.
Yes, sir.
Now, in these papers generally that you have presented, and in general, we do not consider security.
Very good.
So you should consider that also, because
Fine,
the
sir.
data may be sensitive that you are using.
Okay.
Facial data you are trying to use, so that will be very important. So the security is also very important concern that you should look into.
Yes, sir.
And one question I have: what is the basic difference in image compression, general image compression and facial image compression?
So in general image compression, including the background and the image, means both the object and the background of the object is considered for compression, whereas in facial image compression and borderline, we call it as a contour line, is detected, and only facial features such as nose, forehead, cheeks, lips, like this, the major facial features are used for compression, and that is the this is the midpoint of this research work.
So I think segmentation is also required.
Yes,
so
sir.
That is also very important in your work.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other question, Joshi ji? Your mic is mute, Joshi ji. Dr. Joshi, your mic is mute.
I do not have any questions, but it was a nice presentation. And if any of the participants also have questions, you can also use chat board to put questions privately or even in public domain. So
Yes, sir. I'm sharing here with you my email ID.
sure, email ID can
The
also be an
questions.
option. Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Thank you, Pranali. And we are heading towards our next presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Design and synthesis of FIR filter banks using area and power efficient stochastic computing. Mahesh VV. So Mahesh, we are making you unmute and you can now share your presentation. You are already unmuted.
Hello.
Yes, Mahesh, we are able to hear you. You can go
Thank you,
ahead
sir.
and
Thank you, sir.
share your screen.
Hello.
Yes, yes, Mahesh, you can begin. The slide is visible.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good morning to all. My title for presentation is Design and Synthesis of FIR Filter Banks using Area and Power Efficient Stochastic Computing. I myself, Mahesh Baby, belongs to Cochin University of Science and Technology, India. The outline of the presentation is Introduction, Basics of Stochastic Computing, FIR filter using method 1, FIR filter using method 2, performance evaluation and conclusion. Introduction. Stochastic computing is based on probability rules which are different from conventional arithmetic operations. Recently, this SC computation gains attention due to its fault-tolerant capacity and less area requirement. These features are very much attractive for nanoscale CMOS technologies. The main application areas are in the field of image processing and low density parity check bit decoders, LDPC decoders. Basics of stochastic computing. Consider a binary input bit stream 0, 1, 1, 0. This can be represented in two methods using stochastic bit stream, that is 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. And the next sequence is first 6 1 bits and then 10 0 bits. So in more than one way, we can represent the binary number 0, 1, 1, 0 correspond to 6 in decimal. So stochastic bit stream X, capital X, has 6 1 bits out of 16 bits. There are two formats used in stochastic method. One is unipolar format. Input X is a real number within the unit interval 0 to 1, 0 less than or equal to X less than or equal to 1, where the value, stochastic value is probability of the bit stream to be a 1, P of X equal to 1. In the above example, it is 1 bit, so 6 by 16. Total number of bits is 16. In bipolar format, the range of the real number is from -1 to +1, and the stochastic value is equal to P of X equal to 1 divided by 2, and for the above example, it is 3 by 16. Now, the important thing is that the multiplication operation is very complex in floating point method. So this can be very easily implemented using stochastic domain, that is using a simple AND gate in unipolar format, we can perform this multiplication operation. So consider two bit streams x1 and x2. x1 is 1100, x2 is 1001. The output of the AND gate is simply y is equal to 1000. Now see the stochastic values of x1. x1 is 2 by 4, that's equal to 1 by 2. And the stochastic value of x2 is 2 by 4 again, it's equal to 1 by 2. The product of these two stochastic values, 1 by 2 into 1 by 2, that's equal to 1 by 4. Now what about the stochastic value of the output bit stream? That is 1 by 4. That is output, stochastic value of the output represents the product of the stochastic values of the input bit streams. Now this is the ideal case. In practically, there may be some difficulty, that is inaccurate multiplication is also possible. Again, consider x1, that is 1010, and x2 is 0101. The stochastic values are 1 by 2 and 1 by 2. Now what about the output? The AND gate operation output is simply 0, 0, 0, 0. It is 0. So the product is not equal to the output. So accuracy of this multiplication can be improved by increasing the stochastic bit length and decreasing the correlation between the input bit streams. Now similarly, addition operation can be performed using a multiplexer. The output of a multiplexer stochastic value y is equal to probability of number of 1 bits, that is p of y is equal to 1. That's equal to p of k is equal to 1 into p of x1 is equal to 1 plus 1 minus p of k is equal to 1 into p of x2 is equal to 1, where p of k represents a bit stream that is used as the select line in the multiplexer. By setting p of k is equal to half, this addition operation can be realized. Actually, this addition is more complex because the multiplexer is used to implement this design. Only multiplication operation is used in our work in stochastic domain. So these are the basic components and conversion circuits. So for this method, first we have to convert our binary bit stream into stochastic bit stream. Then after the mathematical operation, we have to convert this again back to binary, that is stochastic to binary converter. The first one, binary to stochastic converter, consists of a comparator and a random sequence generator. The comparator compares the binary number, input binary number, and the sequence generated by the random number. And output, if A is less than B, that is random number generator output is less than the input binary, the output of the comparator becomes A1. Now the sequence is repeated by repeating the random number sequence. In the other case, that is stochastic to binary converter, simply a binary counter is used that counts the number of ones in the stream, bit stream. So linear feedback shift register is commonly used as a random number generator. LFSR are sequential circuits that go through a specific sequence of states deterministically. The output of LFSR is compared with binary input data and LFSR output data. If the LFSR data is less than binary input data, the comparator output becomes 1, otherwise it becomes 0. Then the next step, LFSR data is shifted by 1 bit position and compared with the binary input data. This process is repeated for 255 times to generate a 255-bit long stochastic number. Here LFSR is 8-bit long, so that is why 255-bit long stochastic number is generated. Now the filters. FIR filter using Hamming window of order n is equal to 36 with cutoff frequency 500 Hz is selected for the design. MATLAB software is used to simulate the response of the filter, and the filter structure is synthesized by using Cadence Encoder RTL compiler software. So this is the basic structure of a FIR filter using transposed method. Here the importance is that the input sample x of n is directly applied to all the coefficients x0, x1 and x2 for multiplication, so that the critical delay can be reduced. So in our procedure, our work is a 37-tap FIR filter is realized using normal floating point method. FIR filter with the same parameters is then realized using stochastic multiplication operation. Only multiplication operation is performed in stochastic domain in the unipolar format. Stored values of filter coefficients in stochastic bit stream formats are used. Stochastic numbers corresponding to the input samples are calculated instantaneously. To reduce the delay of operation, an array of 255 AND gates are used for multiplication instead of a single AND gate. In conventional method, a single AND gate is used for multiplication, but it will cause a time delay due to large sequence length. A hybrid method of arithmetic operation is used here. Only the computational intensive multiplication is performed in stochastic domain and addition is performed in binary domain itself. Now, a filter bands using 8 filters and 10 filters are also designed, and the frequency bands selected are given in the table. First line represents the filter bandwidth of the filters used using 10 filters, and second line represents the bandwidth of the filters using 8 filters. Now see, the multiplexer, they're using method 2. In method 2, the difference is that a multiplexer is used in the second method to select a stored stochastic number corresponding to the input sample. In the last method, first method, the instantaneously, that means the stochastic bit stream is calculated instantaneously when the input sample arrives. In this case, there are the stochastic numbers bit streams are already stored in memory and it is taken by using a multiplexer. That's the difference in between method 1 and method 2. And this is the performance evaluation, that is frequency response of the low pass filter with cutoff frequency 500 Hz using MATLAB software. In this case, the FER filter, the input stream consists of 3 frequencies. One is at 350 Hz, other is at 3 kHz and 4 kHz. The output of the filter is given in the second graph.
Dear presenter, you just have 2 minutes left.
2 other frequencies are eliminated from this spectrum. And this is the synthesis result analysis. See the percentage saving in area in the method 1 compared to floating point method is 63.88 and it is 66 point something 0.8 in the case of a second method. And for us, whereas the power is concerned, the percentage saving method 1 is 91.66 and it is 92 in the case of method 2. So this is the case with the filter bank. For filter bank, there is a large reduction in area and power is compared to floating point method if we are adopting the method 1 and method 2. See the percentage saving in area for filter bank with 8 filters. For method 1, the percentage saving in area compared to floating point method is 40.35 and it is 50.67 in the case of method 2. And using 10 filters, the area saving is 40.43 and in method 2, the saving in area is 50.76. As far as power is concerned, in the first filter bank, for using method 1, it is 71.24 and method 2, it is 75.92. Using a filter bank of 10 filters, the percentage saving in power is 69.39 and it is 76.20 in the case of method 2. Conclusion. In this work, an FER filter core is designed using 255-bit length stochastic number representation. Multiplication operation is performed in stochastic domain. An array of 255 AND gates are used to further reduce the delay of computation rather than using a single AND gate. In the first method, stochastic numbers corresponding to input samples are computed instantaneously. In the second method, stochastic numbers are selected from memory so that the area requirement can be reduced drastically. Synthesis results show that FER filters method 2 are hardware efficient than filters with floating point method. Method 2 is better than method 1 as far as area, power, and delay are concerned. And proposed methods can be used to design hardware and delay efficient filter banks for hearing aid applications. These are the references used for this paper. Thank you. Thank you all.
Mr. Mahesh.
Okay, sir.
How you have selected the parameters? Like you have used cutoff frequency, etc. So how you have selected these parameters?
Actually, sir, I am doing research in the area of filter bank hardware complexity reduction of filter banks used for hearing aid applications. And I have published 2 papers in this area. One is using constraint least square and other is a minimum phase method. So actually these parameters are very used in the filter banks. They are especially used for filter bank used for hearing aid applications.
I think you should specify that how these parameters are selected that you have not specified. Maybe in detailed paper you have specified.
Okay, sir.
And the other is you have compared your 2 proposed methods, but you have not compared with any other. So how to decide whether these methods are good in comparison to others or not?
Actually, I compared this method with the floating point method. That is the conventional method used nowadays. So I compared this with the floating point method.
Okay, Amit, you can continue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mahesh. And if any participants do have any questions, you can just put in the chat board. Mr. Mahesh you can also share your mail ID on the chat board. So if anybody wants to connect, they can connect. Moving ahead with the next presentation, third presentation for the session, I invite Moyad for the paper towards stopping spread of coronavirus with the help of big data density management. So,
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Amit. Did you hear me?
yes, I hear you, and you can now share your screen.
Okay. Presentation. Did you see my presentation?
No, not yet.
Okay.
You should try once more.
They said to me there is a error code.
No, I think everyone is able to share the participants, so it's easy for you also to share it. Try once more. It's from our side, every setting is open. Are you able to do it? What we can do is you can share your presentation to a mail ID which I am sharing on the chat board.
Yes, I
and
click.
we will take you after this presentation. So we will till then have one more presentation, right? So I have shared you one mail ID in the public chat board, amit@gr.foundation. You can share your presentation on this mail ID. I will put up till that time we can have the next presentation, right?
Okay.
Perfect. So for the same, I invite next presenter, Rekha, if she is there. Hyperspectral imagery classification using deep learning.
So Hari Vijay. Hari Vijay is going to present. Sir.
So it's not there. So Karthik, the paper title is Intelligent Monitoring System for some submersible motor protection.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Karthik, you are there?
So Hari Vijay is going to present the hyperspectral imagery classification.
Okay, then go ahead, please.
Okay, sir.
You can share your screen. We will come back to you, Karthik, later on. Just remember you have 12 minutes for presentation, right?
Hello, sir.
Yes, please begin. Please begin.
See the screen visible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everybody. I am Hari Vijay from School of Computer Science and Engineering, BB College of Engineering and Technology, Hubli, Karnataka. My paper title is Hyperspectral Imagery Classification Using Deep Learning.
Press F5, make it fully screen.
Now, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Hari Vijay, you can continue.
So the introduction, hyperspectral imagery. Hyperspectral imagery is a technique that analyzes a wide spectrum of light. Instead of just assigning primary red, green, and blue colors to each pixel, the light striking each pixel is broken down into many spectral bands across the electromagnetic spectrum. consisting lying in the range from infrared to the visible, the ultraviolet. The hyperspectral image consists of n rows, n columns, and n bands. In HSI, each pixel of the image contains spectral information of the image, added as a third dimension of the values to the two-dimensional spatial imagining, generating a 3D hypercube. Hyperspectral imagining is a task of hyperspectral image classification is a task of assigning a class label to every pixel. Spectral imagery has been widely used recently as it has the advantage of containing both the spectral and spatial information as compared to traditional RGB images. The hyperspectral image classification has become a hot topic in the field of remote sensing, automatic object recognition in urban areas, land cover classification for change reduction and deforestation detection, urban planning, and precise agriculture. The main objective of our research is focused at development of a deep neural network for land cover classification and evaluating the performance of SVM KNN classifiers. The research was carried out on the Indian Pine dataset, the test site lying in the region of northwestern India. So the dataset description. Each grid of the dataset consists of 145 cross 145 pixels and 220 spectral reflectance band in the wavelength lying in the range of 0.4 to 0.45 micrometer, and the spatial resolution is of 20 meter. And the number of classes in the Indian Pine dataset has 16 classes. The Indian Pine scene contains 2/3 agriculture and 1/3 forest land and natural vegetation. The agriculture land consists of different classes like corn, soybean, wheat, oats, and pasture land. About the pre-processing task, extracting pixels of the hyperspectral image is one of the important pre-processing tasks. It makes easier to handle the data and also implement machine learning algorithms. The pixels are individual elements in HSI, which is a vector with the length equal to number of bands in the hyperspectral image. It is hard to process data which is huge of high dimension. So the dimensionality reduction technique that is used is a principal component analysis. The principal component analysis reduces the dimension of the data with the aim of returning as much information as possible. Spectral information latency based on neighboring bands of hyperspectral imaging. The hyperspectral images are highly correlated and contains the same information. So the PCA examines the neighboring bands excuse me, based on correlation and eigenvalues and eigenvectors. Here is the area plot that represents the change of one variable with respect to the other variable and connecting the data points with line segments. A 3D scatter plot, the data points on the three-dimensional axis to show the relationship between the three variables. We are divided it into the three principal components, PC1, PC2, and PC3. The implementation part. The architecture of the convolutional neural network. Convolutional neural network are special artificial neural networks for processing data with grid-like structure. The input to the convolutional neural network is our hypercube data, that is 145 cross 145 cross 220. That is the size of the hypercube data that we are going to feed to the neural network. The convolutional layer applies the filter of size. The 3x3 is applied, and that extract the features, and a feature map is generated for each filter. These are taken through an activation function, which decides whether a certain feature is present or not. Then applying the max pooling layer. We perform pooling to reduce the dimensionality. This enables to reduce the number of parameters. It shortens the training time and overfitting. A max pooling with a window size of 2 cross 2 is applied. We have connected 3 fully connected layers before classification that flattens the results and aggregates the information. Final classification probabilities are obtained using softmax. The training of the CNN is carried out through backward propagation with gradient descent algorithm to update the parameters, applying a learning rate of 0.01 and a batch size of 200. And then a multi-layer perceptron, that is an artificial neural network that consists of 4 fully connected layers. The classification result that we have obtained through multi-layer perceptron, the overall accuracy that we achieved was 86.51%. So here are the results of the input and the target classification result. The experiments were carried out at different input patch sizes on the same Indian Pine dataset. Increasing the patch size gives more spatial context, which results in better accuracy of classification. Here is the validation accuracy with the input patch size. The performance of the convolutional neural network are compared with the shallow classifiers like SVM and KNN. The evaluation matrix, we evaluate the proposed architecture in terms of class-specific accuracy and the overall accuracy. The test accuracy of the developed convolutional neural network, overall accuracy that we achieved is 87.97%. That exceeds SVM and KNN by 11.67% and 15.3% respectively. So the convolutional neural network outperforms all other methods with an overall accuracy of 87.97%. So the conclusion is end-to-end deep learning neural network architecture has been proposed that performs band-specific spatial feature learning for superior modeling. The curse of dimensionality are tackled by using principal component analysis reduction technique. So the experiments on benchmark hyperspectral image classification data shows superior classification performance with overall accuracy of 87%. Thank you.
Can you tell me something about database also that you have used? Pine database, what was that?
So about the data set?
Yeah.
So the data set that the results that we carried out was based on Indian Pine data set, sir.
So
that was,
how many images, some detail of database?
Yes, sir. So this is the dataset description that about the Indian Pine dataset.
No, number of images I am asking.
So it was available in .mat format that consists of 1,200 images.
Okay. And you have given one table. Whenever you give any comparison, then it will be better if you give comparison in form of the graph.
Okay, sir.
No, in this table, I could not.
Accuracy.
In this case, if you compare anything, then you should use graph.
Okay, sir.
So visually we can find out. In this, I am not able to find out which is better in which particular case.
Okay, sir.
Okay, Joshi ji.
Yes. So moving on to the, if anybody has any questions, again, I'm seeing that put it on the chat board so the author can answer it. Thank you very much to the concerned author. And moving ahead, we will take the last presentation, but I haven't received the mail. So we will again go to Karthik for intelligent monitoring system for submersible motor production. Is Karthik here?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Good afternoon.
Yeah, I'm just stop sharing screen. Yeah, you can share your screen.
Is it necessary I should on my camera too?
No, it's not necessary. If you want, you can. If you don't want, it's fine.
Okay. Hello, is it ready?
Yeah, is it ready? It is ready.
Okay, hi, I'm Karthik. I'm from Amrita Vishwavidyapitham, Amritapuri, India. So I have done a work on intelligent monitoring system for submersible motor protection. So I have worked with my colleagues Sai Sachin, Amalji, Alan Christie, and under the guidance of Vipina Wilson and Angel TS. Okay, the main overview we are going to discuss is introduction, objectives, problem statement, block diagram, project description, and conclusion and feature scope. So the main aim of our project is to protect a submersible motor or a pump from any type of electrical or mechanical faults. So mainly our use is on like agriculture uses. We are using it for agriculture purpose, where irrigation needs, where we are using motors or pumps. So we'll be monitoring our working of our motor, especially in the irrigation field. The working is the monitoring of the motor is done accordingly, and we are using an Arduino based motor protection. So a GSM module is used to receive signals to our mobiles and about the working of the motor. And we are using sensors like LM35 sensors, ACS712 current sensors, and voltage sensing circuit are used for temperature measurements and as well as current measurements. So when a fault occurs, the relay will trip the motor and the message will be sent to our, if any person is sitting as monitoring, so he will be receiving a message that our motor is having a complaint, so he can come and repair it at that time. So we are using such a system, an intelligent monitoring system. So the main objective of this project is to monitor the function of submersible motor, pump, or used for irrigation, as I told before. So we'll be getting a regular notification on the load and the temperature values. And they also give message to the control center using the GSM modules. We'll be receiving message, and we'll be receiving message every certain interval of time. We'll be receiving messages on our regular current values, and also regular temperature values. We'll be getting a notification. And this is mainly used as objective because we can avoid further damages to the motor, and fault running of the motor can be avoided such way. And this system is more applicable nowadays because they are having low operating costs using messages and missed goal system. They are using GSM based irrigation. So it is more economic to all of us. So the main problem statement I'm going to discuss is that we have to identify the current and temperature of the motor during the working, and sense the changes happen during regular interval of time. And continuous monitoring of the working of motor and receiving messages at regular interval of time, and send a message to the connected phone using GSM, and to stop the working of motor when there is an excess load or high temperature. So this is the block diagram of our work. So we are using an AC main system and step down transfer connected to it, which uses the AC mains to step down the voltage, and the brick rectifier, which connected straightly to the GSM module, Arduino UNO, and relay. And half HP motor is also used in our structure. This is our block diagram. So we are using a half HP motor. As we have worked on this motor, according to our greater needs or future scope, we'll be using higher grade activities. So now higher rating motors, but we are using a half HP motor is connected to the mains and using a current transformer, and the bridge rectifier devices supply and monitoring systems, and like GSM module and Arduino UNO. The connection further goes to the relay, and when a fault occurs, our relay trips and stop the working of the motor, followed by a message received to the phone. So a relay is used for stripping the working function of the, or cutting the cancelling the working of the circuit. So in this project, we used panels performing for monitoring and remote accessoring of submersible pump. The sensors are used for sensing faults and sending messages to the mobile phone connected. The both current and temperature, as I have mentioned before, ACS 712 current sensor and LM35 sensors are also used. The functioning of motor is being monitored at regular interval of time. We will be keeping an interval of time for which a message is received in our phone. As soon as a fault occurs, we'll be getting a message. Okay, these are the voltage transformers mainly used and current transformers. So a 230 volt AC supply is given to the circuit at low voltage using step down voltage transformer, which transforms the high voltage 230 volt AC supply to a low 12 volt AC supply. The connections further go to the bridge rectifier. So a current transformer is also connected as shown in the block diagram before. It uses the principle of induction. So current transformers reduce the high currents to a much lower current as we are using it in integrated chips and other circuits. So it is better to use a current transformer which reduces the risk of safely monitoring of the system is possible using a current transformer. So bridge rectifier 12 volt AC cannot be directly given to our system. So we are using an AC a bridge rectifier. So and these are connected to the Arduino GSM modules, and bridge rectifiers convert the AC supply to further DC supply, which is divided into 12 volt and 5 volt supplies. So the 5 volt supply from the rectifier goes to the both Arduino UNO and GSM module, and 12 volt supply is directly given to the relay. So sensors, for measuring the current in a circuit, and sensor is required. So a ACS 712 current sensor is the sensor that can be used. That is for measuring the load, and load values are also being sent at for current time. So a current sensor senses the current values every 10 seconds. That is being set at the program. Programming of the Arduino will be setting it as 10 seconds, and the pin P1 of the Arduino is received at the receipt. So LM35 temperature sensor is used whose voltage varies and based on temperature around it. The temperature of the motor is sensed in regular interval of time by LM35 temperature sensor, as I have mentioned before. And these both sensors are interfaced with Arduino UNO. So the Arduino is programmed to control the working of the motor and unit. So Arduino is programmed to give messages in regular interval of time. The current sensor senses the current values every 10 seconds and to the pin A1 of the Arduino, and is received by the Arduino. Similarly, the temperature of the motor is sensed in regular interval of time by LM35 temperature sensors at pins G and D ground, that is, and 5 volt and A0 pins to receive to the Arduino. The Arduino is interfaced with the GSM module. As we know, it is always connected to 11 pin, which is programmed with Arduino to send messages and receive to the receiver mobile. The Arduino is further connected to the relay at the 8 pin, which connects with the motor, thus completes the circuit. So when a fault occurs and is received by the Arduino, a signal to trip the relay is sent, thus stopping the working of the motor. So this is the architecture. Sorry for the non-clear picture. And on the right side, you can see the connections that we have made in our original circuit to the Arduino. So I'm concluding my topic by saying that systems for controlling, monitoring, and submersible pumps, though the short we are using SMS with GSM module, and this system using that SMS with GSM modem is connected. This is has been successfully designed and tested by us, and this design system GSM based and enables the user to control and monitor them from anywhere. With this system, remote powering submersible pumps and continuous monitoring faults were realized. And the GSM-based irrigation have found to have better application as it avoids over-irrigation, under-irrigation, topsoil erosion, and reduce the wastage of water. And GSM-based submersible motor control to prevent it from overload, dry run, single phase using GSM for agriculture. The future in agriculture is mainly dependent on GSM-based irrigation. Thank you. I'm Karthik Ravindran. So my mail ID is given below.
Have you tested your project in real life?
Yes, sir. Our short model has been tested.
Okay, where?
I am from Amritapuri, India.
Okay.
Amrita Vishwavidyapith.
Okay, Joshi ji.
Thank you very much, and we are moving ahead with the next presentation because I have still not received that one author's PPT whom we were allowing to present it. So moving ahead, we have with us
Thank you, Joshi, sir.
Niharika Nayak, cost-aware dynamic data center. Niharika, are you there? No, he has shown his PPT, so we can take this, sir, first. So over to Moyle. I think just Moyle, are you there? Moyle, are you able to hear me?
Yes. Did you hear me?
Your presentation was live right now, so you can continue with your presentation, and then we will take Niharika.
Excuse me?
You can go ahead with your presentation.
Okay. Okay, I will. Now it's okay.
Yes, now it's okay. Perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
Okay, hello everyone. Today I will present you our paper toward the stopping spread of coronavirus with the help of big data density management, realized by me, Tantawi Muad, and directed by Mr. Qabil Mustafa and Mr. Lanawi Mulaydris. Firstly, I will start with a short introduction, and after I will explicit our problematic, and then I will define what is big data, and I will talk about some existing works, and I will explain our methods and results, and a short conclusion. In the context of fighting coronavirus project, we try to improve people density management in the world city, which is a research area that attracts a research community of different domain, keeping up with either social and economic challenges or the safety of the citizens. Places of interest in the city have becoming full of people with non-stop and unbearable waiting lines. The voluminous rise in waiting lines has created many series of social and environmental issues in everyday life in our cities, and mainly at present the propagation of coronavirus. So here we need to find a method for estimating people density on different services within the city, which would help us afterward to create, for example, a balance on different locations where congestion is important. In this direction, big data technologies is the ultimate alternative to control this voluminous data in real time. In our case of estimation people density, we rely on big data technologies to handle their enormous data. These anticipation systems aim to prevent people congestion by developing a safety margin assistant to help people avoid risky high density places. So how to manage all the data collected to improve these systems for stopping coronavirus spread? Hence the need for intervention by the scientific research community by optimizing, discovering, evaluating, and deploying predictive models. It is possible to analyze big data. Predictive analytics technologies help reduce risk while increasing the potential of data. So what is big data? Big data is the mass of data that is very, very voluminous, that go beyond intuition and human abilities. Their dimensions are superior than 1 terabytes, and they are not such as the traditional relational data, but they are raw, semi-structured, or even unstructured data. And the frequency with which data is generated, captured, shared, and updated is very, very high. Now I will talk about some existing interesting works. Demography is linked to statistical measures in social science. Authors here proposed a demography big data management system under Hadoop ecosystem to resolve the problem of demography large-scale data management. The main elements of their proposed system are scope, HBase, and Hive. Their system defines a method to export data from different RDBMS to Hadoop HBase. In this paper, authors designed and realized a new distributed big data management system, which is relied on Hadoop and NoSQL mechanism. And it gives big data real-time collection, search, and permanent storage. Proved by some experiments, DBDMS can improve the processing capacity of huge data. In this time of information age, huge data is beyond the processing capability of traditional data management system to handle and process the data in a specific duration. Authors talk about Hadoop architecture and Hadoop ecosystem to understand how to manage it. In this article, they provide a study that describes an investigation about the propagation of the coronavirus COVID-19. It describes mainly the propagation of the infection among cities, and especially it gives a view of views of the main factors that can affect the spread of the infection in the cities. And in the paper 5, they provide many aspects of the coronavirus disease. It presents an overview of the spread of the infection and reveals possible application of data analytics on this viral infection. And and finally, among systems that helps to control the mass of data and on which we are inspired is the Lambda architecture, which is data treatment architecture that allows handling massive data in batch and in real time. It balances throughput, latency, and error tolerance. Now I will talk about our methods and results. The proposed method aims to construct a base containing the estimated density of people in different services pods at the moment, and after send to people the best and the safe place where they want to go and the route to reach their destination. We first locate places in the city where density of people are high, such as points of services. So we locate all banks, different supermarkets, Wafa Cash, and other services. So then we calculate a number of cell phones in that place, and so we can have the density of people on all places of the city. When someone wants to go to a particular place, he can connect to the application and choose the gender of the desired place, and our system will choose the place of the same gender where the density is lower. So in the first step, it is about the construction of the base. Each local unit of different places of interest detect entrances and exits of devices in the sensor coverage and add them to a temporary base for two reasons. First, we compute the number of cell phones being inside the area, and secondly, we keep track of phones that have been close to each other. After that, it transmits after each 5 minutes this information and its identifier ID to the central system in order to add this entry to the database that contain all points of interest of the city. This database is updated every 5 minutes so that our system has a global view of area densities of people being inside in real time and phones that have been close to each other. The utility of that is if a person has had a positive diagnosis for coronavirus, then our system will notifies all persons that have been close to the positive diagnosis case. After that, when a particular user asks for a desired destination, our system will be able to transmit the optimal point of interest having a low density of people being there based on the database constructed in the first step, and also send to the user the corresponding route to reach its destination. In the simulation below, we took just some users who choose supermarket, name it Carrefour, as destination. So the system should dispatch them to different Carrefours with low density. The table 1 shows the affectation of users to their Carrefour chosen by our methodology based on the database of area densities. The table 2 shows the density status of some different Carrefours and its status after 15 minutes. for example, at 12 o'clock, Carrefour of ID number 1 is full of people, which means it's high density. So next users arrival will be redirected to Carrefour, which has ID number 2 because of.
Dear presenter, you just have 2 minutes left.
Okay. So next users arrival will be redirected to Carrefour, which has ID number 2 because of its low density. Users of ID 4 and 5 will be affected to Carrefour of ID 3 and so on. We notice after 15 minutes the Carrefour which have ID number 1 is lightened. Its density went from high to medium status. That's because when our system see that a particular Carrefour has a high density, it stops to affect users to this full area. So this Carrefour will be lightened after a short moment, and the system can reroute next users to it. And finally, we conclude that big data helped us to improve density management and to construct a real-time handling system that avoid people congestion in different areas and reduce the risk of coronavirus propagation. And thanks for your attention.
I have a question.
Yes.
In your this density that you have taken in your research, is this density of infected persons or density of people in that particular area?
The density in a particular area.
Okay, so infected or not infected, that you are not considering.
I didn't hear you well.
You are not considering whether some person is infected or not.
Affection by what?
In density, are you observing infected persons also?
By some?
In your work, are you considering the infected person in that particular area?
No, I just compute the number of people there, and
okay, so
and then each place will send to central system the number of people being there.
There is one app in India, you can note down, Arogya Setu app.
Sorry,
I think chat him. That will be more helpful. Because
that will be helpful to you.
In India?
In India, there is one app, Arogya Setu app, that consider the infected person, whether he is passing through you or not. If someone is passing through you, then you get some notification.
Yes, we can do it.
So you can consider that, and you can study the processing, the working of that particular Arogya Setu app from India. You can contact Dr. Joshi, he will tell you about that.
Okay, okay.
Joshi ji.
Okay, thank you very much, Maud. And if you have any more queries, or if anybody has having queries to assist him or to question him, please use the chat board. And moving ahead, I think we have with us Niharika. So request you to share your screen, and so that we can easily bind up this presentation, because we have 2 more presentations. So I have unmuted you, Niharika. Go ahead, please, to share your screen. Niharika, are you there? think she is not here because I'm trying to unmute him. Or sorry.
Sir?
Are you able to hear me? Please share your
Yes,
screen
sir.
and start with your presentation.
Okay, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Niharika Nayak. I am from National Institute of Technology, Raipur, Chhattisgarh, and my presentation topic is Cost-Aware Dynamic Data Center Federation Formation for Short-Term Service Requests. So, these are my outlines of the paper: introduction, need of federated data center, objectives, optimization problem, proposed algorithm, then numerical results, and conclusion, the references. So first one is an introduction. So what is a distributed data center? So it is a collection of small geographically distributed automated arranged data center which consists of a number of server where each server has its own processing rate. Also, data center provides a computing resources, storage, and commodity components. So in current environment, the web requests are increasing day by day. So it is not possible for one data center to request all the users' requests. So to serve all the users' requests, so there is a need of to form a group of all the data centers. So that it is called the Federation of Data Center. So it is just a group of distributed data center that want to utilize their unused resources and gain some profit. So federation formation of data center also provides performance and scalability. So in this paper, we consider the two factors which is very important in federation formation of data center. The first one is a spatio-temporal variation in electricity prices. As we know, the electricity prices of different data center location varies over the space and time. It is different and it's up to the data center location. So next one is a demand multiplexing. So demand multiplexing is a user's request. As we know, the in 24 hours users request varies over the time, such as peak demand, mid demand, and low demand. So why we need a cost-aware load balancing data center? In order to understand this term, let us consider an example. Suppose we have an organization which consists of the 50 servers, and each server has a processing rate of 30 requests per second. So therefore, the capacity of that organization to serve the request is a 1500 requests per second. Suppose at peak time the request come to that organization is a 1800 requests per second. So it is not possible for the organization to serve requests at that time. So there are two options for that organization to increase the size of server, or they can share their resources to the other data center. So second one is the best option and also cost efficient to balance the load at distributed data center. That's why we need a federated data center. So these are the objectives of our paper. So first one is to develop the integer linear programming problem for maximizing the profit of federated data center in order to constraints such as capacity of data center, which is also important term, and aggregated request of the users coming to the different client location. Also proposed an greedy algorithm to find the optimal uh, federation formation of the data center. And at the last in result, we also introduce the real world traffic demand at data center for forming the federation. So in order to achieve the objective of our paper, first we consider the system model. So here the figure shows the system model in which the user are the different client location, and the R is a aggregated request which is taken by the broker. Broker is a mediator who handles the task, federation formation task also takes the request from the user and distribute this request to the different data center. As you can see the in diagram that we consider the n number of data center and S1, S2 up to Sn the fraction of request of this aggregated request. Next we consider the power consumption cost, which is very important term to calculate the profit of data center. So power consumption cost is basically the cost consumed by the server at data center. So which is denoted as a CI of S, where I is a I at data center to serve the request S. uh, I have taken this power consumption cost from this reference paper where they define the power consumption cost of the data center. So in this, there is a term used server utilization. So there is a separate formula for the server utilization. It is also taken from this reference paper. After the calculation of power consumption cost, we can easily calculate the profit by the simple general formula of profit calculation, which is revenue received by the user. Also, user paid request paid some amount to for request and minus power consumption cost. Let us consider X be a set of data center to agree to form a federation. After that, we can calculate the profit of data center, which is denoted as a V of X. X is a federation set. SI is the number of requests into the price uh, taken by the broker minus power consumption cost. Our aim is to maximize the profit of the federated data center. In this, we can define as as a integer linear programming problem to maximize the profit in order to constraints such as number of requests at data center is less than its available capacity, and the second constraint is the total number of requests seen by the user is always equal to the number of requests served by the data center. So our proposed algorithm is a greedy algorithm, which is denoted as GFFA. In this algorithm, we consider the variation of electricity price to form a federation of data center. So request first sent to the distributed data center, which has the cheapest electricity price. It means that we sort the data center in order the electricity price of that data center location. So this is the step-by-step procedure of the algorithm. First, we take the request from the user and we store it as a in a set and denoted as a small r, where it consists of the number of requests, capital R1, R2 up to RT. And second step, we consider the n number of distributed data center and store it in a pi k, where k is a iteration. Suppose in a first iteration k is equal to 1, all the data center individually act as a federation set. Now the third step is to sort the data center in ascending order of electricity price. After sorting of the data center, we choose a two federation set or two data center which has the minimum electricity prices. After this, we form the federation of these both two data center and store in a capital X, and then calculate the profit by using the optimization problem. After that, we update the federation set pi k to pi k plus 1, which is given as the x union of pi k except that xi and xj. We we perform this step up to the all the request of the R. Now the numerical result, we compare our algorithm with two other algorithm, which is optimal federation formation algorithm and random federation formation algorithm. So first one is a conventional algorithm, which means it exhaustively search all the possible path for the federation formation, and its time complexity is exponential time. And the next one is a random federation, RFFA. It's randomly choose any of the federation set and form a new federation. So it always it is not possible always to give the optimal solution for RFFA. Next is the experimental setup. So first consider the data center location. We consider the 15 data center location along with the electricity price of that data centers. Here we consider the random number of server at data center is a random number between the 1000 to 1 lakh. After that, we have taken client location from this reference paper. Here, broker, as I have already told that broker takes the aggregated request from different client location, and the aggregated requests are taken from the range 1 lakh to 3 lakh requests per second, and we distribute requests throughout this data center, this client location.
Dear presenter, you just have 2 minutes left.
Okay. Now this we form this request to the different coming from the different client location as given by this graph. This is the request variation from the different client locations of the 24 hours. After that, we calculate the profit of this request. So this is the profit of this is the profit of the request coming to this client location. So as you can see, the profit is also increases with the time. Now the execution time. So in execution time, in our proposed algorithm gives the minimum execution time as compared to the both of other algorithms. Also, we extend our request for algorithm with more other requests such as 3 lakh, 4 lakh, 5 and 6 lakh requests per second. As we can see that the profit is also increases with the request size. Here the result of total profit of the given request. As you can see, the profit is also increases with the request. Similarly, the execution time is a minimum with more request as compared to the both two other algorithm. Now, final is a conclusion. So, I'm concluding that formulated profit maximization problem of distributed data center by sharing unused server in demand multiplexing. We consider the two factors like demand multiplexing and variation of electricity prices, and proposed a greedy algorithm to achieve the optimal solution of the federation formation and also achieve the minimum execution time as compared to the both other algorithms. These are the references. Thank you, everyone.
What is the source of your data?
Sir, I have taken data from other reference paper. I have mentioned in that.
No particular source.
Yes, sir.
And what is, you have mentioned range of data centers. So what is this range of data centers?
No, sir, these are the 15 data center location that I have taken, and the range is the number of servers, sir.
Number of?
Servers at data
Okay.
center.
Okay. Come to your conclusion slide. Last point, you are saying achieved minimum execution time.
Yes, sir.
How can you say that this is minimum?
Sir, in this
It may
result,
be lesser, but not minimum. Minimum in comparison to these 2 or 3 only, other 2.
yes, sir.
But in general, you cannot say that this is the minimum. Maybe in other papers, you find out that some value is lesser than this.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
Joshi
sir.
ji.
Thank you very much, and we are running short of time, so I request the last 2 presenters to bind up their presentations quickly and directly start with the actual work what you have done. So, inviting the second last presenter, Mansa P, for the paper DMHC, Detection of Malicious Node. Is the author here? Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Hi all. Myself Manasa P. I'm doing my research work under the guidance of Dr. Shaila K, Professor, Department of Electronics and Communication, Vivekananda Institute of Technology, Bangalore. My research paper, it is DMHCET. It is a detection of malicious node for hierarchical clustering based on energy trust in wireless sensor network. So this is the basic structure of wireless sensor net. So when we consider wireless sensor network, it consists of 3 important blocks, that is the sensing block, computation block, and the communication block. So sensor here will sense the information and will analyze and will give the information to the computation block where the analysis of the data is being done, and the communication block in turn will transmit the information from the sender to the receiver. So we have different classification of wireless sensor networks based on the type of nodes and the collection of nodes and the number of nodes. So wireless sensor network. It consists of randomly deployed sensor nodes, which monitors the physical and environmental conditions. Since these nodes are battery operated, there comes a point where the storage, the battery capacity becomes a major problem here. So they are limited with the battery and the storage capacity. So it imposes certain constraints. Very important constraints we consider as the quality of services. These are the certain parameters which has to be met when the transmission has to happen from the sender to the receiver. So to achieve this, I have employed like some of the low energy clustering and hierarchical protocols, because of which we are able to achieve some secured path from the sender to the receiver. So this algorithm, that is DMHCET, it adapts hierarchical clustering zone. So we have named like different cluster zone formation, and because of which we are able to achieve the quality of service improvements in terms of throughput, packet delivery ratio, energy consumption, and average end-to-end delay. So these are the certain research issues in this field. So it demands energy efficient algorithms to be designed in this wireless sensor networks. And whatever the algorithm that has been designed has to be tested for various different routing architectures. And for this, it demands some quality of service parameters, whatever like packet delivery ratio, a few parameters like this has to be tested. And what is the time required? It should always consume a lesser time. So the computation time is also a question here. Now, along with that, very important one is whether it is able to provide a secure transmission between the sender to the receiver becomes a problem here. So this is these are the research issues considered to the wireless sensor networks. So now, the reason why I took this DMHCET is when we consider clustering of nodes, the problem arises like how the cluster formation is being done and how the cluster heads are being selected. So now, since we are going for this hierarchical levels, so different levels are being defined. Now, from each level, a head is selected. So this head in turn will send the information to the next higher level. So now, to choosing this head is a question mark here. So what we have to do is we have to design a proper secure verification algorithm. Otherwise, there is a possibility that these cluster head may be, instead of choosing a cluster head, some malicious node may be selected as a cluster head, which will completely interrupt the, which will disrupt the entire network. So there won't be any communication. So that is the problem. So for this to happen, we need to provide certain secure verification path and also secure steps where efficient and trustworthy nodes are selected. So main aim of this work is to develop techniques for addressing secure routing nodes and also to reduce energy consumption, in turn increasing the network lifetime. So detection of maliciousness, that is DMHCET. So for executing this algorithm, we have adopted leech and fuzzy C-means technique. So we have defined two hierarchical levels. So we have with randomly deployed nodes, I have considered 50, 100, 150, 200, 250 like this. So many iterations is being done. So for all these iterations, some of the nodes have been classified. So those nodes are grouped and calling it as clusters. So out of those clusters, one cluster head is being selected. So that cluster, whatever it is being defined and whatever the head is selected, it is called as head 1. Now, the second level, next level is head 2. Among these head 1, so it will be further communicate to the sink or the destination via this head 2. So for doing this, so first basically from out of all the cluster zones, we have used leech protocol. This is the low energy adaptive clustering hierarchical method. So because of which we are able to choose the cluster head 1. So head 1. So now from the base station, we have used this fuzzy C-means technique and we have considered the head 2. So these, all the cluster members will communicate the information to the cluster head. This cluster head will in turn communicates to head 2 and head 2 in turn reaches the information to the sink. This is what the method is adopted. So for all these things to happen, the first step in this algorithm comes, that is neighbor detection. Each of the nodes should be aware, like who are the neighbors. So what is its position? So first step in this algorithm is neighbor detection stage. So following this comes the head selection, that is zonal heads, zonal head 1 and zonal head 2. Now, after the zonal heads are selected, we should validate whether exactly a trustworthy heads are selected. So for this, validation of the head selected is being done. Next, whenever the communication is initiated, always the node has to transfer the information to the trustworthy next top neighbor node. So for this, a trust computation is being done for each of the nodes here. Now, to calculate the trust computation, I have considered this energy trust parameters here. So various energy consumption of the various functionalities that has been adopted in this algorithm are being is being discussed here. So for all those things, we have calculated the energy trust and we have taken one threshold, we have been compared with the threshold value. In case if it is greater than threshold value, we consider that to be the trustworthy node. So such nodes are involved in the communication. In case if it doesn't match with whatever the values we have designed, so that is considered to be the malicious node, and such nodes are not involved in the communication. So motivation. So the main motivation to take up this work is, so since the nodes are battery driven and they have limited energy capacity, so it demands effective routing paths. So hierarchical clustering is one such method where we can distribute the responsibility, because instead of one cluster head taking the responsibility of monitoring the entire cluster, so here the responsibility is being shared by taking hierarchical levels. So that is the main motivation for taking this work. And also by adopting this trust measuring techniques, we can have the secure transmission from the sender to the receiver. So algorithm of DMHCET follows like this. So in the first stage, deployment of nodes. As I've told you, I have taken random nodes of 50, 100, 150, 200 like this. Now, after the nodes have been deployed, the first stage is the neighbor detection stage, where each node will be aware whether who are these neighbors and what are their positions. Next, cluster zone formation. So after the cluster zone formation is being done, the next is the head selection. So we have cluster head 1 and cluster head 2. So this is selected based on the leech and fuzzy C-means technique. Now, after these heads are selected, the next validation. So validation, for the validating this head selection, so we have some node IDs which are present whenever we define 50 nodes or 100 nodes. So with those node IDs, we are going to match. We are going to compare the node ID of the selected heads node ID. If both of these two, whatever the head ID of the head 1 and head 2, if it is present in the node ID list, that means to say it is one of the node that has been adopted here. So that assumes that the validation is cleared. So it proceeds with the next step, that is energy trust calculation. So next step is to initiate the transmission. So to initiate the transmission, first it has to consider which is the next best of node. So for that, the energy trust calculation comes into picture, where the energy trust calculation of the node is being done. For doing that, so we have taken whether it's a regular node, clustering node, or whether it is one of the cluster member, like all these things. So we are based on that energy calculations, we are going to set the energy trust value. So if the energy trust value is 0, we consider that it is one of the malicious activity and such nodes are not involved for the communication. If the energy, whatever the trust value is equal to 1, then we assume that it is like a trustworthy node, and such nodes are involved in the transmission. And I have tested like for few of the QoS parameters like throughput, packet delivery ratio, delay. So such QoS metrics have been tested. So hierarchical clustering of nodes. So this is the deployment of nodes. So these are, one shows that these are the randomly deployed sensor nodes.
Dear presenter, you just have 2 minutes left. You can just conclude with the presentation.
Okay. Now, these are the randomly deployed nodes. So out of these nodes, so node number 2 that will have the maximum energy compared to the other nodes. It has the maximum energy. So that is selected as cluster head 2. So now cluster head 3 is selected based on the fuzzy C-means technique, that is from the base station. Next, evaluation of the energy trust of sensor node. So for this to happen, we have zonal head verification. So out of the heads selected, as I've told, based on the node IDs, we are going to verify whether it is a trustworthy heads. Next, energy trust calculations. So energy trust calculation, for this we have regular nodes, cluster head nodes, and cluster formations. So we have various equations which is being considered here. So what is the energy requirement at the sender side? What is the energy requirement at the receiver side? And also we have cluster, for the cluster head, it also does some functionalities like data aggregations, where redundant data can be aggregated and it transmits. So what is the energy consumed by it? So all these things are taken into consideration. And what is the energy spent by the regular node for transmitting bits? So these are also considered. So here the total energy is calculated, and it is going to take for the variations. Now, in case if whatever the energy consumption, if it shows a larger variation, then we consider that trust value of the node to be 0. Otherwise, if the variation is less, we consider the trust value of the node to be 1. So based on this, we are going to say whether it is a trustworthy node or not. So this is a network simulation. So I have implemented this in this network simulator 2 platform. So I have tested for various nodes, and what of the QoS parameters I have defined here, it has been tested compared with the Leech mobile techniques. So performance analysis of throughput, packet delivery ratio, average energy, and delay. So if you see here, the throughput, since this DMHCET, so your data processing capacity is more, because it avoids transmission to malicious node. And so what happens here, the processing rate of the algorithm is more. So that's the reason it is able to achieve higher throughput when compared to Leech mobile. Packet delivery ratio. The packet delivery ratio is also greater when compared to Leech mobile, since the number of packets that are dropped due to malicious activity is lesser here. So what happens here, automatically this packet delivery ratio is also improved. Next, we have energy consumption. So average energy, since we all know that, so this DMHCET is it shows a better improvement, since whatever the energy it is wasted in retransmission when there is malicious activity, what happens? The data will not reach the sender. So what has to happen? We need to go for the retransmission. That is what it's happening in Leech mobile. So whereas in DMHCET, so it is able to detect the malicious activity. So it will take an alternate path whenever it detects some malicious activity. So that's the reason like average energy, whatever it is required, is better when compared to Leech mobile. The delay. So it does not take the complete process of retransmission once the packet is lost. So it is able to detect and it will take the alternate path. That's the reason the delay is also less. So benefits. So here, this algorithm, it shows that efficient energy utilization in the network, and it improves network throughput and minimizes the packet loss. So it reduces the packet transmission to malicious node, and it has maximized the throughput, or it shows a better when compared to Leech mobile. It shows better throughput. It also minimizes the delay, and it increases the network lifetime. So these are the references what I've considered. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mansa. Dr. Tyagi, any comments?
No, it's okay.
Okay, then if your audience have any comments, please use the chat board to raise questions to Mansa. Thank you very much, and we are moving ahead with the last presentation. Charles, are you available?
Sir, ako na po sir ang magpe-present sa London. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Sir, wait.
Go ahead.
Ako na sa London, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, sir, tawag po ako ulit. Okay, bye-bye po. I will now be sharing my presentation.
Yes.
Sir, bye-bye na po. po. So let me just locate my PowerPoint. I'm so sorry. I was in the middle of a call.
Just bind up your presentation within 10 minutes so that we can be able to close the session. Already we are running late.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so wait, I'm just gonna. Okay, so good afternoon, good morning. I will be sharing one of our research entitled eConde, Electronic Condiment Dispensing Machine in Public Markets. And this is a collaborative research from the College of Engineering through Engineer Keith Tabal and from my college, College of Computer Studies, with the help of Alec, Angelo Porquesa, and yours truly. And this presentation is outlined firstly via introduction, followed by a literature survey, research methodology, results and discussion, conclusion, recommendation, and references. So to start with, when a person is hungry, one would go to a supermarket or grocery to buy bread, and that is neatly packed in a plastic. The person removes the bread from the plastic bag, then eats it. But when another thing is when a person when you need a soy sauce for cooking, you go to a store and you buy the soy sauce and packed and sealed in. So you open the plastic, then use the soy sauce for cooking. The bread and the soy sauce and the single-use plastic served their purpose, but and the bread and the soy sauce are gone. So, but the single-use plastic, single-use plastics will be around for a few centuries. Because today it's almost impossible to buy anything that is not wrapped in plastic in supermarkets and in grocery stores. And in my country, in the Philippines, we have what we call sari-sari stores or the roadside shanks. These are actually food retailers that sell single-use products that are usually packed in sachets. You can immediately tell that it's a sari-sari store with a dangling display of sachets, sachet packets up front. So the one that you are looking at is an example of a sari-sari stores. And what's worse with these retailers is that they would even repack their products, particularly condiments, from cooking oil, soy sauce, vinegar, ketchup, and what have you, in small throwaway ice plastic bags. These products in sachets were such a big hit, particularly in my country, to low and middle income consumers because it allowed them to get a taste of almost any product in a tiny quantities on a day-to-day basis. So this is actually what we call the tingy culture, which accelerated the sachet economy in the Philippines from marketing to advertisement. As a result, the use of sachets grew in scale, which now accounts to about 59.8 billion sachets annually. And this is according to GIA report. The GIA is a group who assesses wastes in the Philippines. And according to their report, years worth of sachet use in the Philippines can cover the entire Metro Manila. Metro Manila is the main capital of the Philippines, 1 foot deep in plastic waste. Recently, considerable attention is being directed to refillable packaging systems, such as the research in the 1011 references, wherein multinational companies started pilot refill projects. However, they offered the project on a limited basis, particularly because they have a problem in the cost and market criteria. And their dispensers were placed at upscale shopping stores that do not cater to poor consumers. That is why the project failed. Another references served as an alternative supply chain that helped reduce carbon footprint due to transportation and electricity. And other researches used alternative refill system through reverse vending machines, solar-powered refillable machines, others package-free machine beverages that that caters more on beverages side, such as water and coffee, but all these researches do not cover the sachet or condiment packaging problem. Now, the real challenge now is to eliminate single-use packaging and reduce plastic wastes. And our technology approach to this challenge is to design a low-cost electronic condiment dispensing solution that supports the promotion of sustainable packaging to help eliminate the use of conventional single-use plastics, particularly in public markets where we can see sari-sari stores. So this study is also resulted to a new theoretical framework, which I call refill and go, dispense and go, or simply coined as REGO-DGO. This model is an innovation on how liquid products are delivered by suppliers and consumed by consumers. It actually presents an opportunity to innovate how liquid products are delivered and consumed, as illustrated in the figure that the one I'm showing you. So for the results and discussion, for the first specific objective, or the SO1, which is to develop an electronic condiment dispenser prototype that also addresses the coin change prototype. For the research method and techniques, the prototype development methodology, or the PDM, we use the model-based design workflow that has a series of loop phases. This includes the research and requirements, design in the loop, test and verification in the loop, this one, and the real-time testing in the loop, the last part of the model. So the eCondi prototype is actually based on the block diagram illustrated in the figure. Its major components include a coin slot, input buttons, LCD, ultrasonic sensor, liquid pump, solenoid, actuated change dispenser, and an Arduino Mega 2560 board, which served as the main controller or the heart of the system. And the figure on the screen is actually the system flowchart on how the eCondi operates. So the same was actually utilized by the respondents who tested and evaluated the prototype to determine its functionality and efficiency. This is actually the pseudocode of the coin change using the greedy algorithm. And the pseudocode was written in Java using the Arduino IDE 1.7.10, which is an open source software. This is the actual front view of the eCondi system. So the first arrow is the 16:2 LCD display. The second is the coin slot. The third is the coin change dispenser. The fourth arrow is the input buttons for the 100 ml, 200 ml, and 340 ml. And the fifth and last arrow is the condiment dispensing area. This is where the consumer will put their bottle, but the prototype will not dispense unless the bottle is within the dispensing area. So to answer SO number 2, which is to determine the level of acceptability of the prototype based on the ISO 9126 indicators in terms of functionality, efficiency, we use the black box testing, which is used to determine the level of acceptability of the prototype as against the ISO 9126 indicators, efficiency and functionality in the form of the acceptance testing. So the acceptance testing is actually a replica of what the prototype is in the live environment. For example, a scenario from the coin insertion, volume selection, liquid dispensing until coin change dispensing. The purpose of this test is to evaluate the prototype's capability to fulfill a given test purpose and in effect influence the respondent's behavior and perception towards the performance under stated conditions. The simulation test is immediately followed by the survey questionnaire to promptly capture the respondent's experience. The survey questionnaire is a one-page questionnaire consisted of an introductory paragraph.
Dear presenter, you just have 2 minutes left.
Okay. And the main section, which is comprised of the mix of close-ended questions. We also used this disproportionate stratified sampling for the respondents and applied Likert scale to determine the total percentage of responses based on the acceptability of the proposed system along the two criteria. So these are the result. This is the distribution of respondents. The results for the efficiency indicator, as shown in the table, the efficiency indicator received an average weighted mean of 4.61 or an adjectival rating of highly acceptable. For the functionality indicator, it received 4.63 or highly acceptable as well. So overall, the system obtained an average weighted mean of 4.62 or perceived as highly acceptable by the respondents. So for the conclusion, a self-service coin-operated dispensing machine called as eCoinde was developed. It uses the greedy algorithm for the implementation of the coin change. The prototype received a 4.62 average weighted mean for both the criteria, and considering the possible implementation of the prototype in markets, it can be a way to reduce the use of single-use plastics and in the long run, help protect the environment. Recommendation for technology advancement, these are our recommendations. Further evaluation on other factors, which such as on the pump problem, mechanical impedance, and particularly also conduct a health study since we will be catering food. These are the references of my of our paper, and thank you so much for your time and for listening.
Okay, Joshi ji, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chalice, and
thank you.
It was amazing to listen to all the presentations, and thank you, Dr. Tyagi, because I understand that it is really difficult for chairing a session in digital mode because you need to stick to a screen for a longer number of time.
Yes.
But appreciate your presence and your comments to the. If anybody has any queries, you can just chat, and this session will be again open for next 5 minutes or so. And I request my team member Deepika to kindly present a certificate as a token of appreciation to Dr. Vipin Tyagi. Shortly, she will be presenting, and till that time, my thanks are also due to the authors, all the authors who have contributed there. The cycle time for this whole presentation is approximately, paper publishing is 2 to 3 months as of now. We have already sent e-copyrights to all the authors for signing their e-copyrights. There are 20% authors which have been left out still to sign, so they will be signing in next 1 or 2 days. So by the end of the week, we are hoping to send the complete data to IEEE, and we are expecting a publication date in approximately mid of October or something for the whole proceedings. And till that time, please be patient. Still, if you have any queries, please write to us on email. We will be happy to answer and support you. And you will also receive the certificates of presentation, a thank you letter, and the payment receipt just after the session is over in the next couple of minutes. So once again, thank you very much, and have an amazing time wherever you are. Once again, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to you all. Stay safe, stay happy, and contribute to society as and when you can. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we will be sharing the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Vipin Tyagi on his personal email account shortly. Thank you, Dr. Tyagi, for your presence, and look forward to see you all in World Expo 2021.
Thank you, Joshi ji. Thank you.
So this is for you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And still 2-3 minutes, the session is over live. So if anybody wants to chat or anything, and before closing the session, if you all can ping up your photos, ping up your cameras so that we can just click a snap before we end this session. Anyways, thank you very much, and look forward to see you all next year. Bye.